It was a warm Wednesday morning when Adanna rushed out of her office halfway through a board meeting, her high heels echoing against the marble floors of Lumotech headquarters. The caller ID had said Saint, Jude's primary, her daughter's school. Her chest tightened as she held the phone to her ear. Mrs. Adanna Kalu, the voice on the other end was calm but firm. Please come immediately. Your daughter collapsed during recess. In that instant, the tall, confident woman who spearheaded multi-million naira contracts became just a mother, heart thudding against her ribs like it wanted to leap out. She didn't even shut her laptop, just grabbed her bag and ran. By the time she arrived, her neatly pressed blazer was soaked with sweat. Her mascara smudged from tears she hadn't even realized had fallen. Kioma, her only child, lay unconscious in the school's infirmary, surrounded by nervous teachers. Her little blue pinafore was crumpled, socks dusty from the playground, tiny fingers limp by her side. She just fell, the nurse explained. We gave her glucose water and called you immediately. Adanna knelt beside her daughter, whispering her name over and over again. She hadn't even kissed her goodbye that morning. She'd been too busy finalizing figures for a quarterly report. Back at home that evening, Adanna sat on the edge of Kioma's bed, watching her breathe. Doctors had run tests. Exhaustion, they said. Possibly malnourishment. Adanna stared blankly. How? She made sure the fridge was full, hired the best home tutor, and even got a housemaid to make things easier. That tutor, Obi, had come highly recommended, polite, intelligent, always punctual. He was soft-spoken, often arriving with books tucked under one arm and a warm smile. But she now noticed something new, a slight unease in Kioma's body language whenever he was around. That night, Kioma stirred in her sleep and whimpered. Adanna leaned close. "What is it, my love?" The girl's voice was barely a whisper. "Mommy, I don't want to drink Mr. Obi's tea anymore. It tastes funny and makes me feel dizzy." Adanna froze. "What tea?" she asked. Kioma blinked slowly, eyes still clouded with sleep. "The green one he gives me before lessons. He says it helps my brain think faster." Her skin prickled. The feeling of dread settled in her stomach like a stone. Something wasn't right. The next day, Adanna returned home earlier than usual. She walked in quietly, heels muted against the Persian rug in the hallway. From the living room, she heard Obi's voice, low, relaxed, not instructing but chatting. Through the half-closed door, she saw him on the couch, one leg crossed over the other, laughing. Kioma was nowhere in sight, but what made her blood run cold was the open mug on the table, still steaming faintly. She picked it up and sniffed. It didn't smell like anything she gave her daughter. Adanna pretended not to notice when Obi greeted her cheerfully minutes later, wearing his usual charm like a mask. That night, she searched her daughter's school bag. Tucked into a small side pocket was a folded napkin, and inside it, 2 small green tablets. Kioma had said nothing about tablets. Adanna's hands trembled as she stared at them, her thoughts a whirl of panic and guilt. Was she being paranoid, or had she invited danger right into her home? The next day, Adanna took action. She called in a favor from an old friend who worked at the state lab. She handed over the tablets and the tea residue she'd saved secretly in a flask. "Test these for anything suspicious," she asked quietly. She didn't want to believe anything bad about Obi, but her daughter's life wasn't a gamble. Meanwhile, she kept acting normal at home, watching Obi closely, faking smiles, noting every movement, every flicker of emotion in his eyes. That weekend, she told Kioma not to take the tea. She lied and said the doctor said it was causing her headaches. Kioma nodded obediently. Obi noticed the change, but said nothing. "She'll need more help with maths," he offered, eyes darting toward the girl. Adanna nodded slowly, something in her heart breaking at how close she'd let this man come to her child. Later that evening, her phone buzzed. Her lab contact had replied, "You need to see this. It's serious." Inside the government facility, the analyst explained gently but firmly. The tablets and residue both contain trace amounts of benzodiazepine, a class of sedatives. In small doses, they induce sleep, reduce resistance, and impair memory. especially in children," he added. Adanna stared at the report, her hand shaking. Her baby had been drugged, slowly, over time, and she had been too distracted with work and board meetings to notice. By the time she returned home, her rage had matured into something fierce and calculating. She didn't confront Obi immediately. Instead, she installed hidden cameras. For 3 days, she waited. What the footage captured chilled her to her bones. Obi, when alone with Kioma, would give her the tea and watch her drink. Then he'd switch off the lights in the study, put on loud music, and scroll on his phone while the girl dozed off beside her open books. Once, he even let in a male friend who sat drinking beer as Kioma slept on the couch. Adanna downloaded every second of the footage, her face grim with silent fury. She couldn't bring herself to scream. There was no room for hysteria now. This required strategy. She burned the clips onto 3 flash drives and sent them to trusted people in different circles. One to her lawyer, one to a friend in the press, and one she kept under lock and key. Then, she made an anonymous call to the police and reported suspicious activity in her home. She said she wanted to meet them privately to share something that could involve child endangerment. The officers she met at the cafe took one look at the footage and sat back in stunned silence. "We've been tracking this man," one of them finally said. "He's not just a private tutor. He's linked to a quiet ring that drugs and traffics children slowly over time. It starts like this: sedatives, fake tutoring, disorientation. Then one day, the child just disappears." Adanna felt the room spin. Kioma had been marked. If she hadn't acted when she did, her baby would have been another photo on a missing child poster. With the police now involved, Adanna agreed to let things play out one more day. The plan was to catch Obi red-handed. Cameras were upgraded, hidden microphones planted. Kioma had been moved to a friend's house for safety. That Monday, Obi arrived as usual, carrying his suspicious flask. He was extra cheerful, like he sensed an endgame approaching. What he didn't know was that behind the bookshelf, an officer sat armed and watching, and another watched from the security van parked a few houses away. Everything unfolded as predicted. Obi poured the tea. Kioma's stand-in, a young undercover agent, accepted it and sipped lightly. Minutes later, Obi dimmed the lights and reached for his phone. Just as he began making a call to his delivery man, officers burst in. The tutor leapt up, knocking over the tea, but it was too late. He was tackled to the ground and handcuffed. As they read him his rights, he cursed loudly, face twisted in hatred. But Adanna stood quietly at the door, face cold as stone, watching it all without blinking. The next morning, everything was quieter. The news hadn't broken yet. Adanna sat in her kitchen, hands clasped around a steaming mug of untouched coffee. The walls felt too close, the silence too sharp. Guilt clawed at her. How many times had Kioma tried to tell her something wasn't right? How many moments had she ignored her daughter's mood swings, thinking they were just from school stress? Work had consumed her life, but she'd failed to see what mattered most. She walked to Kioma's room, which still smelled like baby powder and lavender. On the dresser was a small crayon drawing, a stick figure girl and a taller one beside her, both smiling under a rainbow. Above them, written in shaky handwriting, "Me and Mommy forever." Adanna pressed the drawing to her chest and wept. For the close call, for the innocence nearly lost, for the mother she hadn't been. She vowed never again. The court case moved fast. With the video evidence, drug analysis, and police testimony, Obi's defense crumbled like dry cake. He tried to fake innocence, claimed it was all fabricated, but his phone records and connections betrayed him. 4 other families had come forward with similar stories once the news aired. They too had lost children, some still missing. Obi was linked to all of them. He was part of something larger, something global, but for now at least, he would never hurt another child. Adanna testified boldly. Her voice did not shake. She spoke not just as a mother, but as a representative of every woman who had been gaslighted into silence, every child who had been ignored. When the judge sentenced Obi to 27 years in prison, there was applause in the courtroom. But Adanna didn't smile. Justice was served, but wounds remained. Kioma had escaped, but scars were harder to erase than criminals. Kioma, now safe, began therapy. She spoke little at first, but her eyes were brighter. She liked her new school, and she slept better. Adanna began working from home, attending only the most important meetings in person. She painted with her daughter on weekends, cooked dinner side by side, and read bedtime stories again. They began learning to live in the present, not haunted by the past, but gently shaped by it. One night as they lay on the balcony stargazing, Kioma reached out and touched her mother's hand. "Will he come back?" she asked softly. Adanna shook her head. "Not ever again." The stars twinkled above, the wind humming softly through the mango tree. Kioma snuggled closer and whispered, "Good, because I like this version of us." And for the first time in a long while, Adanna smiled, not from relief, but from real peace. Adanna didn't stop with just saving her daughter. She began to speak at women's conferences, raising awareness on child protection, single-parent vigilance, and silent predators in modern homes. Her story went viral. People listened. She created a foundation named Kioma's Light, offering support to mothers and training for domestic workers and tutors. Her company tried to promote her to regional director, but she politely declined. Instead, she poured her energy into advocacy. She partnered with law enforcement to create better vetting systems. Her face appeared on morning talk shows, but she never let fame dilute the mission. "If even one child is safer because of my story," she often said, "then it was all worth it." The boardroom applause could never match her daughter's safe, sound sleep. Despite progress, nightmares still visited Kioma. Some nights, she'd wake up crying, gripping her bedsheet, whispering about strange men and dark tea. Adanna would rush in, hold her, rock her gently until her breath slowed again. Healing, she learned, wasn't linear. It came in waves, some soft, others violent. Therapy helped, yes, but so did honesty. They no longer avoided hard conversations. They named their fears and met them together. One day while cleaning, Kioma found a photo of Obi tucked in an old notebook. Her hands trembled as she brought it to her mother. "Can I burn this?" she asked. Adanna nodded, and they went to the backyard together. As the flames consumed the image, Kioma watched quietly. "He doesn't get to live in my head anymore," she said. Adanna hugged her close. That was the moment she knew her daughter had turned a corner. Months passed. Life began to feel normal, or at least a new version of it. Kioma started laughing again, loud, unfiltered laughter that made Adanna's chest swell. She joined a local music club and found joy in playing the violin. Adanna, meanwhile, began dating again, tentatively, carefully. Trust was difficult, but not impossible. Her first dates were clumsy and awkward, but eventually she met Ayo, a widowed father of one who volunteered at her foundation. Ayo never tried to fix her. He simply listened. He respected her story and admired her strength. When he finally met Kioma, he didn't try too hard. He asked her about her music, not her trauma. Over time, the three of them began to form something that looked like family. Not a replacement for the pain, but a beautiful sequel. On the one-year anniversary of Obi's arrest, Adanna stood before a packed auditorium at the National Child Safety Conference. Behind her was a large banner, "Guardians, not just parents." She recounted her journey, not as a victim, but as a warrior who stumbled and rose again. Her voice carried weight now, not just for her, but for countless others who were still too afraid to speak. In the audience sat Kioma, proudly wearing her school uniform, violin case beside her chair. When her mother stepped down, she ran up and hugged her, not caring about the cameras. "You're my hero," she whispered. Adanna smiled, fighting back tears. "No, baby, you're mine." That evening, the family sat on their porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills. The orange glow bathed their faces, soft and forgiving. Kioma played a gentle tune on her violin. Ayo held Adanna's hand. For the first time in what felt like forever, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a promise. Their home was no longer just walls and windows. It was a sanctuary. Adanna looked at her daughter and thought about how close she had come to losing her. But instead, through that pain, they had found purpose. She now knew what her life was for: to protect, to speak, to love fiercely and loudly. And as Kioma's melody danced in the evening air, Adanna realized something beautiful. Sometimes, the most broken stories become the ones that save others.